little more challenged. So that 15 days, even though that's regulated and that's low, we oftentimes just simply, we can't hold them to that standard simply because it's sometimes not possible. The workload is just too much. And you'll probably notice that there's a lot more, well, I have noticed.
Hello, Barb, Ash, and Ronald. Welcome back for another episode with us at Canadian Real Estate Podcast. How is everybody doing today?
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Supriya.
Thanks, Supriya, for having us.
Oh, absolutely. We had to bring you back after listening to the amazing results that you got from the previous recording. So somebody who did not get a chance to listen to the previous episode, we recorded around January, I believe. January 27th was the time when we had released your episode. And Barb and Ash, they talked about BRRRR, flip, adding a legal ensuite or legal unit to your property. And we had some phenomenal response out of that. The downloads were amazing. So I want to ask you guys, Ash and Barb, what kind of interest, was there a specific strategy that people were interested in hearing or learning more about? What was the outcome from that podcast?
I think the strongest, obviously, why we're here today is the BRRRR strategy. So the flippers have their own kind of system going, where they buy and who they use and contractors, and a lot of them are contractors themselves. So we do kind of always have offered this one-stop shop on the BRRRR strategy, where we do have our specialists that we work with, like Ronald, and the contractors we use. So I think that concept was a huge interest. So we got a lot of questions, and a lot of people really wanted to dig deeper into it. We definitely had. We've helped a few clients from that podcast, which has been like tremendous success for all ends. So today we wanted to invite Ronald as well to answer a few of the more specific questions that we were dealing with.
Right. Awesome. Thank you.
I guess what maybe we could talk about a little bit first is why the BRRRR strategy is kind of the strategy to go right now, considering the market conditions.
Yep, let's talk about that. So back when we had you in January, market was completely different. Everybody wanted to invest in real estate. The interest rates were still super low, although the values of these properties were still, at a higher end. Now it's shifting. We are seeing obviously the increase in interest rate. The market has kind of not cooled off, but going the other way, where it's not a seller's market anymore. It's going more towards that balanced market. Prices for properties we are seeing are coming down slightly. So what are your thoughts? Like where it was initially in January and where it is right now, and what are we looking at? Is it still even a good time to make that investment?
Good question. So, in any market cycle, things go up, things go down. If you look at the stock market, for example, it's a daily fluctuation, and you could kind of track that. With real estate, it takes a bit longer. We've seen the same kind of dip in the last couple of months. Overall, I saw a stat the other day, we're still up year over year. We're up 12 months back, 20%, right? So the market's still healthy. There are people in the market, transactions are happening, but I see a lot of people on the sidelines. So they're waiting, what could be tomorrow. So is it still a good time? Absolutely. I mean, you're looking at a long-term strategy. That's what you're looking at. Well, always buy something cheaper than with potential to go up. If you're looking at flipping, perhaps, maybe you're trying to time it a little bit more. You're trying to time it, I guess. Okay. And that's, unless you have a crystal ball, that's still a very difficult task to do. Going back to, some of the things that we're seeing people talk about is, as we get into the BRRRR strategy, it's you're creating your own money. So you're not depending on the market, whether it's going up or down, you're creating your own wealth. So in this burst strategy or the creating the second suite, you're creating wealth yourself, and that's kind of what we're here to talk about.
Great.
We're still seeing that spread. So it's just the market has shifted. So yeah, the houses are cheaper on both ends. So they're not selling, the end product isn't selling for as much, but you're not buying it as much. So that spread is still there. You're forcing the appreciation. By creating these legal duplexes, they're still covering themselves entirely, which is great. I think the advantage,
Barb,
one more advantage, a huge advantage in buying in this market is that the competition is like here compared to where it was. And we're getting things like people being allowed to put conditions in and taking a little bit more time and shopping out there and getting great prices and deals. Whereas I guess maybe if all this pent up demand hits, where everybody's sitting and waiting, that competition is going to drive right back up, and maybe we'll see the prices kind of these particular properties, these investment properties, increase dramatically again.
Let's talk about that spread, Barb. But in the height of the market, what was the gap, the spread between the purchase price and the refinance price?
It almost got difficult because we had grandma's old bungalow selling for like over $900,000, like unfinished completely. And the end spread, we were seeing numbers in 1 week on one street, we saw a 1.220 and a 1.345, so those are pretty like huge numbers. But these properties kind of had a little bit more potential with garden suites and big lots. And I think we're going to dive into that a little bit too today with Ronald. So where, we've got the ability to do it all. We have the ability to do the legal duplexes. We've been doing them. We've got garden suites happening. We've got permits in for them, and It's kind of exciting.
But Barb,
bylaws allowing.
But what I want to add to what Barb just said is, in the height of the market, there was at least $100,000 to $150,000 that was made by the investor. So they're buying it at this number, they're spending up to here, and then the house is worth $150,000 more. And today, about 100. Sorry,
today.
About 100.
Today.
Okay, and in today's world, the purchase price is lower. The renovations are still the same, but the new price of the duplex is still $100,000 to $150,000 more than the after repair value, if I worded that correctly. So there's still a 6-figure spread regardless of the market we are in. And that is the beauty of this strategy. You're forcing the appreciation, and it's a 6-figure return in 4 to 6 months, depending on your project management
And our
team.
strategy is long-term. We know that, it's pulling out that it's getting the renters in and refinancing it and repeating it.
Exactly.
So investment is long-term. Real estate investing is a long-term strategy, and in the end, it works.
Great, awesome. Now, moving along, now we are, kind of focusing on the burst strategy, like you mentioned, buy, what was the other word?
Renovate,
Renovate.
rent, and refinance.
Refinance and repeat.
Yeah.
Anyway, so why don't we talk about, and we'll pick Ronald's brain here. But before I actually get there, Ronald, do you want to do a brief introduction about yourself, who you are, what you do, how you've been helping other investors in the area?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So my name is Ronald, of course. I'm the founder of Property Pathways, and we've been in business for approximately 6, going on maybe 7 years now. And, I personally am a construction professional, educated and experienced in that realm. I come from the commercial realm. But a few years ago, I decided it was time for me to basically step into the residential arena and really start aiding sort of real estate investors in their in their, desire to conquer the world through one property at a time, right? So, in doing so, we really help real estate investors by getting their building permits, managing that entire process. So it's a done for you end-to-end process that we deliver. So basically, you would come to us essentially when you engage your realtor or are looking for a property. So from the time you engaging your professionals for mortgages, and you're starting to look for a property, we would help you determine what type of zone is the best zone based on the goals that you sort of have in mind. And yeah, so we do all the way from single family renovations like flips, right, to 2-unit conversions, the great garden suites that are happening now everywhere. And we also do triplexes, we do 4-unit, multi-unit conversions. In fact, we're working on a few multi-unit conversions in the city of Hamilton. Those are what we have found to be a huge uptick now, given the price, the point of entry, and the rate of return on some of these investments, cash on cash and so forth. So we've seen a lot of people really coming into the multi-unit burrs, which are actually extremely profitable and becoming super popular now. And me personally, I'm a BCIN designer. And what that means is that I do everything an architect or an engineer does, I just get a bit more dirty, right? So I crawl into holes and I climb into ceiling spaces and I get the information I need to get the job done. And I do it with a smile too, so.
Yeah,
I can
our listeners can probably not see you, but one huge compliment, your smile is awesome. And then secondly, I love the background behind you, because I can see exactly what you do with, legal duplex conversion, I suppose. Like I can see big windows. So guys, you cannot see this, but there is a beautiful sketch. Like, is it a rendering or something like that, where it looks like a basement unit that has been converted into a legal duplex, I believe. And
Yeah.
is that right? Okay, all right.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So in fact, the sort of backdrop that you're looking at, that is actually, I can post that up in Zoom. But yeah, we essentially on every property, and might be super unique to what we do, but on every single property, we utilize 3D scanning technology to extract the data from site. We also, as a company, do all our permits and designs are done using 3D modeling. And then we also take all our clients through a design option where we walk them through the actual building using virtual reality technology as well. So we like technology, but we also like to get dirty. But most importantly, we like to get the job done. So.
I like the sounds of it. I like the sounds of it.
Yeah, can I touch quickly on that?
Yeah.
From the very point of purchase, before the actually deal is closed, we usually bring Ronald in on a revisit to draw the design. So this is a quick advantage of having this connection with Ronald, so that we can get those permits done as quickly as possible and drawings done.
And time is of essence, right? Like any project, time is of essence. So you don't want to be working on the permits and all the designs and stuff like that after the closing. Whereas if you can come ahead of time, that saves so much time, because you could potentially be saving so much interest and mortgage payments and stuff like that. So the idea is, as soon as you close, your renovations should be able to start within, just a couple of days or that week. At least the trades can be lined up and items can be ordered. So there's a lot of time management and time saving based on that strategy for sure. Good. Okay. So, Ronald, when somebody is purchasing, I'm going to take an example, very specific example. Say, for example, if it is a single family dwelling in Hamilton area, let's pick that for now. What are some of the steps that need to happen in order to convert that single house dwelling into a legal duplex? Let's start off from there, and we'll, slowly throw in some more examples.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, just like most realtors probably tell all their clients from the very onset, location, location, location. Well, just for us at Property Pathways, we choose to like maybe modify that a little bit. And we like to say zoning, 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 right? So it's really important, they're interchangeable. You can certainly, it's synonymous. Like you can certainly interchange those two things, because the location is really based on zoning. Mostly in Hamilton, specifically in Hamilton, they have amended their zoning bylaws to allow for 2-unit conversions pretty much on every lot, right? And of course, and now you can actually do up to 3 units per lot. And this is a Bill 108. I'm not going to dive into the details of that. Lots of information is on sites, on website, government websites, but essentially you're allowed to add 3 units per lot. So when you're looking for these properties, and I walk Barb and Ash through this on a number of occasions. Now they are experts at doing this stuff. They don't need me anymore to do this. But once you're walking a client through sites, and we're primarily looking at the exterior sort of factors that govern whether or not it can be converted. So as I mentioned in Hamilton, let's have using Hamilton as the guinea pig here, that we're going to essentially use you must, in fact, know that the site has sufficient room for parking. This is going to be the number one requirement. Now, I'm going to say this, right? Parking is extremely important. You need to have 1 parking spot per dwelling unit, right? And that was the case up until the 31st of May, 2022. I'm going to put that date there because the planning committee in Hamilton just recently voted and approved amendments to the zoning bylaw, which allows for parking that exists to be maintained, but no additional parking to be actually added when you're renovating your single family to a 2-unit. So just to be clear, no additional parking is required. Now, this was approved. It hasn't been formalized as yet, but this is the new change. But so I'll kind of shelf that whole idea and I'll just talk about what exists today. So we need to have 2 parking spots. Right, that's going to be super important. The parking spots could be located in the front yard, both parking spots side by side, but they cannot be in tandem. So this is like the most important factor in terms of determining whether or not you can place these 2-unit conversions in a single family. Now, I want to just talk a little bit about 3rd units. 3rd units are extremely important, and this is what they call "quote unquote" garden suites. But in fact, they're really secondary dwelling units, detached, right? So it's a detached dwelling unit at the side of the building. These can be put into existing garages, or you can build a new property, a new detached structure at the back of the existing property. There's a lot of requirements that go into that. And, to get into all the details of it will be a little bit tricky on this recording here. But I will say you need to make sure that if it's existing, a lot of the bylaws do not apply. So you get to keep the existing structure and just renovate it into a new dwelling unit or a 3rd dwelling unit. If you're building it new, one of the really core features or one of the main zoning things you must account for is the depth of the backyard, because you need to maintain 7.5 meters. And I talk in meters because they're easier, shorter numbers to remember, but I think that might be something like 25 feet or something so, right? But with that said, that's going to be one of the core things that you have to take into account if you're building a new sort of detached unit at the back of the property or garden suite, right? So, and yeah, you got side yard setbacks and so forth. That is extremely important. You do also run into some cases the challenge of looking at tree locations, right? Especially if you need to widen your driveway. There's some other features, for example, like fire routes, which is extremely important. So, and in Hamilton, this is not a challenge. But if your property is, if your property is located greater than 45 meters away from a fire hydrant, which is never really happens in Hamilton, you will run into challenges of how does the fire department basically provide service in that particular unit. So it has to be within 45 meters of that fire hydrant. So that's a really important factor as well. And outside of that, really there's other things that will be taken into account, like conservation, whereas if you're in downtown Hamilton, you'll probably look at heritage requirements and make sure your property is not a designated or listed building. But with that said, those are things that we look at after we make sure that parking is in order, right?
Yeah. So just to be clear, every city, Hamilton, St. Catherine, Brantford, KW area, they have their own specific bylaws that you need to abide by in order to make the secondary unit or a garden suite, coach house, whatever it might be. Is that correct assumption?
Yeah, no, that's actually a fact. And so yeah, you absolutely need to know the specific zoning bylaw in each municipality. So it's actually, is municipal zoning bylaw is specific to each municipal, whether it be upper tier or lower tier. Each municipality have somewhat different zoning requirements, which define the characters of their neighborhood. But I will say this though, Supriya, is that basically, even though they are specific to each municipality, they have the general same framework. And that's what makes it easy, like for someone like myself, to basically decipher any zoning bylaw. It could be behind God back, right? But we will find it, we'll find the zoning and we'll find the information, because the framework, once is in Ontario, the framework of the layout of this document are generally the same across the board.
Okay, got it. Now, is there a particular city that is your favorite in terms of getting all these permits and stuff like that, and some cities where it would take longer, or turnaround time is much longer compared to the others? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, good. No, that's a great question and a loaded question, to be honest. Asha and Barb probably saying, yes, it's loaded, it's loaded. But the truth is, I like to say that there's no really best city, but there are cities that are better staffed, right? Some cities are better staffed and they're able to take on more volume, but also that can also be sort of a challenge as well, because when they're usually more staffed, it means they have more permits being submitted and received to be reviewed. So rather than turn to what city I like, I would say, I can say the city that I work a lot in is Hamilton. I do a lot of work out in the southwestern areas, in Niagara region and so forth. But I would say, let's use Hamilton as an example. The Ontario Building Code, right? This is province-wide, actually does stipulate in there as part of the Building Code Act as well. It does mention that they have to take up to 15 business days to review a typical 2-unit conversion building permit, right? But what we have found since COVID happened, right? It happened to all of us. So we kind of are all sort of understanding when we find that people are behind on doing certain tasks, because things have changed. And one of the main changes that happen in most building departments, including Hamilton, is that they are no longer accepting physical like building permits. So everything is done via their e-plan sort of platform. And most of their employees now are working partly home. It's sort of a hybrid type of workforce, right? So it has become a little more challenged. So that 15 days, even though that's regulated and that's law, we oftentimes we can't hold them to that standard, simply because it's sometimes not possible. The workload is just too much. And you'll probably notice that there's a lot more, well, I've noticed in the past 2 years, much more building permits have been issued and been sent in for review than prior years. So a lot more people are buying properties, a lot more people are renovating properties, and this is what's actually also creating a little bit more delay. So I like to tell my clients and them, listen, it's 15 days. We understand what the law is and what's required of them, but they oftentimes won't get to it. They won't get to look at the drawings, not until about 20 to 25 days, right? So in some cases, a month, they may not even look at it, right? So, and I'm understanding, I'm empathetic, and then sometimes we also run into that situation because it's so busy now. So hopefully that answers your question. In terms of timeline, it will take about, I would say, 20 to 25 business days to get a review. And then once that review comes back, it usually has 1 or 2 comments, and then that has to be addressed, right? Before it could be returned to the plan examiner to actually finalize it, right?
Yeah, got it. Okay, now let's move on to costs of adding these units. So on an average, single detached, what's the cost of adding a legal duplex or a basement unit to be converted into a legal 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom unit?
Yeah, so a legal 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom, these detached, you're talking about detached unit, right? Yeah, so I'm not a contractor. So with that said, I work along with a lot of contractors, and I'm sure Barb and Ash, they also have contractors on their teams. I would say you're looking at probably around, and I'm going to give a square foot range, just because these are relatively new, right? New
Oh, you're
to
talking
the
garden
marketplace.
suites. Okay.
Yeah, sorry?
No, we're talking garden suites, not the basement.
No, I'm
Right?
actually specifically asking about the basement for now, but I'll
The
move.
basement, okay.
Oh, just the basement. Okay, yeah. So on the basement, okay, so I can, I myself have managed a few of these, and I know what those costs are, but I also know that it has escalated significantly, right? So what I'll say is you're looking at approximately about 120 to like 150, depending on finishes, right? And depending on, and now this is sort of, I would just say this is just hard costs and soft costs, like I'm talking about here. And there's still profits and overheads for the contractors. Every contractor will carry a different type of overhead and profits and different structure. So I would say you still need to add maybe 15 to 25% on top of that price range. So to account for the contractor profit, because they're running your project, right? The 120 to 150 range, that's just for your trades and your materials, right? And of course your permit fees and stuff like that. So really and truly, it's not a super inexpensive process, but it's not an expenditure, it's an investment, right? So that's the huge thing that I think a lot of people will take away from something like doing a basement renovation.
Yeah. And Barb, were you going to add something to it, or?
It kind of, it varies. It really does, depending on what you want to do within it, and the floor plan and the house in particular itself. You know what I mean? Sometimes you'll get in, you'll need a new roof, or you'll need waterproofing, or you don't, or all the windows are already done, or there's already 2 bedrooms existing down there that are like an easy like design floor plan, whether it has a big cinder block wall in the middle, or does it have just paneling that can come down in the construction process. I think most of our projects, we do see that 130 to 150 kind of all in with our contractors at the end of the that's where we've been running at. Most of them, like the finished product, including everything and permits, and has usually hit the 150 mark, about that all told.
Got it.
But it all depends on the exact house, I guess, that you purchase, and like Ronald said as well, the finishings. But these projects that I am talking about, yeah, these are nice units with like quartz countertops and pot lights, and definitely desirable places to live in, which can generate top rents.
Okay, sounds good. So let's talk about the time frame. How long does it typically take for a construction or a renovation like that to happen these days, considering there might be delay, if there is still continuing supply issues right now in the market? What time frame are we looking from start to finish in terms of completion of these projects?
I think you need to budget probably in there about 5 to 6 months, just because of those kind of things. So there are delays in permits, like Ronald said. Sometimes there are delays in kitchen cabinets coming in, or whether you're getting them cut, but there's ways around some things too. So I think the renovate, like, it's probably a safe bet to have that 6-month plan.
Okay, now what is the potential cash flow now when we add this secondary unit? So say, for example, if a single detached could potentially rent for, I don't know, 2,800, 3,000 perhaps in the neighborhood. And if you add that additional dwelling, what's the potential cash flow for that asset?
We have clients who have had no problem bringing in a 2,500 renter plus utilities to the top floor and 2,000 to the lower floor.
Okay.
So that's a pretty good number.
It is.
There's definitely a demand for rent out there. So now
I don't know where Barb went, but I can take over. And in terms of a tenant profile, what we're seeing is just the basement unit, you've got people having jobs making 90,000, 75,000, and we're looking to charge $2,000 of rent. So the tenant profile is still it's a high quality tenant that we're looking at renting out these places. So if you're getting 4,500, give or take, utilities, that's a pretty significant cash flow, however you cut it. It doesn't matter what the interest rate is, but it's a pretty huge cash flow.
Yeah.
So,
and how much value are we thinking that we have added to that asset? So say, for example, purchased, I don't know, what's a reasonable price to take? 700 was, for example, a purchase price.
So that's a price today. Okay. So you can buy it for 700. Renovations are going to, we established 150,000. So that'll bring you to 850 6 months later. And I think we're touching 950 today.
Yep. And that's what you were saying earlier, that adding that 100K or six-figure number to your price.
Six-figure number. And that's assuming a zero appreciation on that, right? So, you're spending 150 and you're getting 100 out of it. That's a 75% return on your money in 6 months.
100%.
Right. So those are the numbers.
Amazing.
Okay, great. Now let's make the discussion even sweeter by talking about the coach house or garden suite or alley homes. Like there's so many names to it from what I understand. So let's talk about that specific channel of adding cash flow. What's the approximate cost we're looking at? 80,000, 250. I hear like different ranges for it.
I've seen quotes of $300 a square foot.
Okay.
So that's the number we're targeting, and you're looking at anywhere from 600 to 800 square feet, depending on how you decide to build it.
I think Ronald, you can touch on this too, but it's 600 if you want to do an upper and lower per floor, and 800 square foot total if you want to do like a bungalow kind of version in your backyard.
Yeah, that's right.
Correct?
So there's different type of configurations here, and of course the configuration will dictate the cost. So Ash is right. So based on what I've also seen and some of the trades and contractors that I've been talking to, you're looking approximately at about 300 to 350 per square foot for what I'm calling a flats. And I know this is not the terms like realtors use. A flats would be more like a condo or something like that. Yeah. But when I say a flats, I'm just talking about a property that's on a slab on grade, right? Just like a detached garage sort of setup, slab on grade, exterior finishes, likely siding, vinyl siding, a regular type of shingled roof, right? That you're looking at about $300 a square foot. If you think that you want to do like a crawl space, right? Maybe a bit more excavation or full basement. Well, of course, that really blows the price up, right? If you're also thinking about a second story or maybe a super tall ceiling type of layout, like a big vaulted ceiling, a lot of open space, you're probably looking at more price as well. If you're looking at a half story on top of that, you're probably looking at more cost as well. Not probably, definitely. So, to talk about Hamilton specifically, you're looking at the maximum height is 6 meters, right? 6 meters in height, right? That you can actually go up. So with that said, 2 stories sometimes is not really possible to make a full height, right? Unless you do like a flat roof, right? Type of layout. So you'll find most of these most people are usually just going 1 story. Right, you can go with a shed type roof, or you can go with like a gable roof. A hip roof, of course, will cost more. So without getting to the specifics of the construction itself, what I'll talk about is maybe the type of construction that also kind of dictates the cost as well. And when I say type, I'm talking more like there's like modular construction, right? That can be used, meaning like it's built off site and then it's brought is built in a controlled environment in some warehouse somewhere, and then it's shipped to site in parts, right? So it can be built that way. Then you can also look at container units, which is like a different type of format of these. But again, these are sort of sort of built off-site and assembled on-site, right? And then of course you got your traditional stick framing. So each method has its pros and cons, but ultimately this also dictates the price. So again, when we're talking about price, I would just say to any of your listeners is that it's really good to speak more specifics about, what their timelines are, what their budgets are. And then, of course, you can reach out to various type of contractors that are doing different things. But stick framing is probably the option that most people are going to go with, because most people actually have access to that type of resource, like contractor contacts and so forth, versus a modular type of builder or container type of format as well.
Yeah, fair enough. Now, again, reverting back to Barb and Ash on this, how much are you seeing these garden suites being rented out for? If you can give us a range for a 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom, that'd be of interest.
Well, having said that, it's too new for that. Like, we've got permits in, but we don't have them necessarily on site. They exist out there.
So if we're looking at single homes are renting out for about $2,800, assuming projected, right? Just a regular single home across the street. So I would project about $2,500, slightly lower, for a garden unit, which is its
own house. You drive right up to your own house, and right? So yeah, I'm thinking for sure that.
So $2,500, that works out to $30,000 a year. We spoke about the cost just now, which works out to about $300,000 to construct. So $30,000 rent on a $300,000 investment is a 10% cash on cash return. If you get a mortgage on that $300,000, you're looking at, I don't know, $1,200, give or take, maybe $1,500, Supriya, somewhere there.
Yep.
Right, $1,500 a month, and you're getting $2,500 in rent. So that's another $1,000 a month cash flow opportunity. So those are the numbers.
Yeah, one caveat is that at least from bank's perspective, these are so new that you wouldn't qualify for a mortgage, right? Like, this is a very new concept. It will take time, obviously. Banks are typically like a dinosaur. It takes us a number of years to adapt to something new. But now,
construction loan.
But it's still, at some point, it will make sense to convert it into a mortgage. Otherwise, your construction loan is much higher. What will be a better way to do is potentially, if you've done burst strategy and added a second dwelling to your main residence, refinance that money and then go cash while you can, until you figure out some kind of financing solution for that additional garden suite, right? It will still be cheaper in order to go that route, because you can still remortgage your main dwelling. And
most of our clients have that in mind. When we search for these properties, we find the property with this, like, the potential for a future garden suite. And then they kind of concentrate on the first project with just the legal duplex conversion. And then get that going, and yes, refinance and what they choose to do with that after. But maybe keep in mind, like, increasing the water line for the future, to build that garden suite right from the get-go, and find the property that potentially has that value in it.
Exactly. And I think if the foundation is correct, based on the assumption that the property is built in such a way that even if you're planning on selling it, it's a great asset, so that whoever is going to purchase, at least the foundations are ready for it. I don't know what exactly that's needed, but water, pipeline, electricals and stuff like that is already set up ahead of time while you're already doing the second conversion.
Yep.
So that definitely adds value eventually if you're planning on selling it at whatever time frame, right?
100%. And maybe I'll just add here and say, maybe I should have added one more option, which is probably the most cost-effective option for building these type of garden units. And myself and Bob and Ash have also talked about these as well. When they're looking for properties, it's great. It's always a good idea to look for big lots that you can build new if you need to. But it is also really good if you found a property that has an existing garage, because oftentimes that garage can be used as the basis for creating that detached garden suite, right?
That's
So
detached garage, just to be clear, that we are referring to, right?
yes, detached. Not,
Yeah.
Well,
And,
it's not clear.
if all does go well with these new bylaws that Ronald had mentioned before, with the requirements for parking not so stringent,
yeah,
then these existing garages are much more likely to happen. Because before that, we had to allow parking in the back, which you not get around that garage properly, so we had to tear it down. I have a house listing right now, in particular, with this advantage. So maybe we don't even have to take it down like originally drawn in the design, and that we can actually convert that garage right into that garden suite, which would be
yeah.
fantastic. Mhm.
Excellent. Okay. Now, let's talk about the word that nobody likes. It's about taxes. So, property taxes. Do you see, does it impact the property taxes since you have increased the value of your property and so on? And if it does, what's the impact that we're looking at?
So I think it will impact property taxes when they are reassessed. However, we haven't, gone through one to give you an idea of what that looks like. So I don't want to comment on that, but I'm pretty sure it will impact because you have added further square footage to the property.
Okay.
Oh.
So
Is that a strange thing, right? You're certain it will impact, and it's literally impact is the one that's doing the
impact. It will impact.
yeah.
All right. One last question from my end, and then we're open to just having a general discussion is, what does a legal non-conforming unit really means? Because I've seen that in the listings quite a bit. So I just wanted a bit more clarity on that.
Yeah. Wow. Ash, do you want to give us a go?
Well, it's grandfathered
Okay,
in.
no.
A lot of it's grandfathered in if it was already
Yeah.
there and it was running as a,
Yeah.
a legal duplex, but it doesn't meet any of the criteria of today's legal duplexes,
Yeah.
but it's already got the zoning for it, then that's one.
No, absolutely. So yeah, and this is something we encounter frequently, right? There's legal non-conforming, and really how you want to approach this is obviously if you see legal non-conforming on a listing, you certainly want to ask more questions, like what's really causing the non-conformity aspect of it. So essentially, like back in 1994. There was some new rules that the government implemented that basically they would allow for these units to be converted, right? Like existing properties that were rented out prior to like 1994, I believe, they would allow them to become legal, right? And then essentially anything that were built after that time, I think November the 1st, 1994, 1995, something like that, they would then have to comply with these new regulations. So in most cases, this was kind of the overarching legal non-conforming sort of regulation or law that was put into place. But what you can see even now is that if a building was built in let's say, I'll just say 2000, when they said, well, basically driveways you only allowed to have one driveway, or one driveway was required, right? On a property in let's say Hamilton, right? And then in 2010, they came with a new bylaw and they said this property needed to have, every property going forward needs to have 2 driveways, right? Then the property that was built in 2000 with the 1 driveway will be legal non-conforming, right? Will be legal from the zoning standpoint, right? And then the non-conforming part is just stating that it may still need to meet further requirements if the use was ever changed or modified, right? So let's say you decide to do something addition, then that legal non-conforming would have to be brought into conformity, right? So that's kind of my take and understanding of it. And by the way, this is usually referring to 2-unit conversions or 3-unit conversions or buildings that are generally being rented out. And you would certainly need to go through the process of getting it up to snuff as far as the fire regulations, fire safety goes on these properties. So once you see a legal non-conforming listing, it is definitely important to reach out to either a building department or someone like myself to come out and have a look and kind of walk you through the steps necessary. And we have worked on a lot of these in the past. There's a lot of zoning bylaw enforcement related items, and we walk clients through these and get them their properties up to par with no problem.
With a legal non-conforming unit, they're basically saying it was allowed back when it was built in 1970. So sometimes when you come into those properties, maybe trying to do a legal sweep may not be the best use of that property because it's already there and it's allowed. So maybe you're not wanting to mess around with it too much. But if you do break it up, that's where Ronald needs to come in and make sure we're doing it correctly. Because as soon as you change it up, you have to conform to today's zoning requirements. That's
Okay.
Oh, yeah, and you know, a lot of cities are now implementing. I think, in fact, Hamilton has a pilot project right now on the licensing and registration of these unit conversions or these rental units. So this is also going to bring to light a lot more of these legal non-conforming properties or illegal properties, which is different from legal non-conforming. And these properties will have to be brought up to legal status. And as I mentioned before, that's primarily focused on fire separations, smoke alarms, you know, sound attenuation and so forth, right? So there's a lot involved with it from my standpoint, but I do agree with Ash. If it's in functioning condition, just leave it. Maybe just change the flooring out. You know, don't go around and start changing the use, because then you start to trigger a whole bunch of new requirements.
Okay, sounds good. Well, while we are close to wrapping up, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah. Go right ahead, sure.
Anybody can go ahead. Barb, let me ask you first. So why don't you go ahead first?
No. I was gonna just thank you for bringing us on, and there was this fantastic information from all of us that we'd like to share with our clients and your clients, and hopefully we can do this again.
Yeah, absolutely. Ronald, any final thoughts? Any final things that I know we tried to touch most of it, but there will be still a lot of questions that our listeners would have. We will share your contact information on the show notes. So any final thoughts? And also, if you wanted to share your contact information, you're more than welcome to do that now.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So most people can truly find me where I'm, I guess, mostly active. I guess I'm mostly active when I'm working with my clients, and I Ash, Barb, and other contractors and so forth. But with that said, I'm on Instagram. You can certainly reach me there, right? Property Pathways. You can certainly email me at inquire, or in fact, email my office at accounts@propertypathways.ca. And my final thought here would be maybe garden suites is truly a way to increase the value of a property, but it's new, right? It's new not only to investors, but it's new to the building department and their whole review process. Like, it's still a choppy process in most cities, right? And it's not only choppy from the building permit review standpoint, but there is requirements for water line upgrades that isn't really, like, there's a lot of departments that are still trying to figure it out. Like, the right hand isn't speaking to the left hand. There is items like, getting a new address for your detached. So you have to apply for a new address in some cases for those detached units. And, in some cases, not in Hamilton, but in some cities, depending on how many additional units you're adding, depending on the zone, remember, location, zone, depending on the zone you're working in, and depending on how many units you're adding, there might be something may apply what is called development charges. Development charges can be costly. So you definitely need to make sure that you are basically exempted from development charges or apartment charges. But also these detached units, from a fee standpoint, is significantly more than the fees. And when I say fees, I'm talking about building permit application fees right? Those fees are significantly more than a 2-unit conversion,
How
where
much
you're
are we
looking.
talking about?
Yeah, you're looking at probably, so a 2-unit conversion, roughly about $1,500 to $1,700 worth in building permit fees, right? That's your parkland fees and your deposits and your water line fees and so forth. Whereas when you're doing a detached conversion, the fees can be upwards of like $4,000 or $5,000, right? Like for the review, because it's being reviewed as a new building essentially, right? And there's a lot more consideration that goes into that. So I would say, definitely a detached unit certainly needs to, those fees need to be accounted into your pro forma when you're running your numbers, because that can be much more than your closing cost on a property in some cases, right? So it's certainly an important number to put in there, right? So that's kind of my closing thoughts. And thank you very much, Supriya, for having me share this information with your audience.
My pleasure. Ash, any final thoughts, comments?
Sure. Yeah. I just wanted to add, right now there's a lack of rental units out there. Houses are expensive. This model that we're talking about, we not only do it ourselves because they make a lot of money, and a lot of our clients subscribe to it as well. So if you're looking, regardless of how the market is going up or down, and you want to make a quick $100,000 in forced appreciation, this is a foolproof model. You can almost see what the end result is. What are they selling for today? What are your costs to build it? And there you go. So, rental demand is still very strong. You're creating your own appreciation. 400,000 people are coming into Canada this year, and they still don't have a place to live. So it is a good model. It's a very good model. So those are my closing thoughts.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. This was super helpful, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners are appreciating for your time today. And your contact information will be shared on the show notes. So thanks again.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Supriya.
Take care.